Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wizzo Talk. Today's topic, sexual assault, awareness, and prevention. And before we get started and get to meeting let everyone meet our guest, I just always like to remind everybody that it is absolutely free, 100% free to like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate your support. If you have any of the viewers have any questions for any of the guests, please type it up in the comments and I'll share them on the screen. So at this time, we're going to go around and we're going to meet our guests and we're going to get it going on. Miss Monica, what you please?
Okay. Good evening. My name is LaMonica Mercy. I am a licensed professional counselor and founder of MCH Counseling. I do contract work with other organizations, and I can be found on different platforms like Counseling for Black Girls as well as Psychology Today. So if anyone's looking for some counseling, hit me up.
All right, all right. Thank you, Miss Jones.
Yes, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for having me on your show this evening. Yes, my name is Tanya Jones. I am the CEO and founder of Interactive Advocacy. We are a violence prevention production company that uses theater and film to dismantle the rates in which violence occurs. And I'm also the president of the North Carolina Veterans Business Association in North Carolina. So wearing a couple of different hats, but definitely excited to be here with you all.
All right, all right, all right. And my brother from another mother, Ari Baker.
All right, everybody, how y'all doing? My name is Arby Baker. I'm a retired Army guy, but I've been doing Sapper EO for a millennium. Half of that time I was doing with my battle buddy, Miss Tanya Jones, since 2003.
Hey.
Hey, you see on my shirt, Combat Sapper EO is one of the many nicknames that I earned working with the military and civilians to combat sexual assault, sexual harassment, and provide equal opportunity EO opportunities for our people. I work primarily with interactive advocacy to put this word out and stop the madness that's going on. And that's all I got for now.
All right, outstanding. You kind of covered one of my questions that I was going to ask you, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. And then you
bring
can go
it on
ahead.
out, brother.
So you know, I already know it. So usually what I do in my podcast and everything, I always ask the viewers, hey, if you have any hot topics you like to discuss, please invite, bring them on, let me know. And we'll have your show on the guest on the show. But so Arby, I came to you with that, and you once said, you brought this topic to my attention. And you also referred me to Miss Jones. So my question to you is, why this topic and why Miss Jones?
Okay, first of all, why this topic? This topic is important because it's been going on for way too long in the military and the civilian community. It's super important to me because it seems that as far as we try to step forward to make change, effective change, it seems like society is making 2 steps back to support predatory behavior, predators, and not doing enough for survivors. Why Miss Jones? Why not? This woman, and I am biased, I'm gonna put that out there, is a phenomenal woman that has the same drive, grit, and determination that I have to combat sexual harassment and sexual assault. Like I said, we go back to 2003 when we've been doing this, and I have been lucky to be able to come under her umbrella with interactive advocacy to take the word to the masses. And I'll let my battle talk about that because we just did some stuff that was so good but so exclusive we can't even share with you all the stuff. But we're gonna keep doing the stuff. Hint, hint, secret squirrel.
Right. All right. And just before I come to you, Miss Jones, just to say, Miss Monica, I remember you being a counselor and everything. So I just wanted to reach out to you to have you on here to get your experience. Maybe you've witnessed some of this, saw some symptoms, saw some of whatever. And so I appreciate you for accepting the invite. I appreciate all of you. But that is why, Miss Monica, I asked you to be on the Wizzo Talk with us. So with nothing else further from me and myself, I'll come over to Miss Jones and see what you got for us, Miss Jones.
So why prevention for me? Battle said, why not? But the reality is that there's no society in which violence doesn't exist, right? And because we know that violence is everywhere, we have to do our part to at least dismantle the rates in which it occurs. And I have found that through unparalleled storytelling and through lived experiences, it's a great way for us to connect with our audiences, right? Because we're talking about some very difficult topics: sexual assault, sexual harassment, domestic violence, human trafficking, suicide, just to name a few. Those are some pretty heavy contents, and it's hard in itself to get people engaged and have open communication, right? So, for us, we found that by at least putting these performances and these presentations on the stage the way that we do, people are more comfortable. They're laughing, sometimes they're crying, but ultimately we get people talking. And that's what our goal is. And if we can get them to talk about this stuff, hopefully we can get them to kind of create some cultural shifts in some of these behaviors, poking fun at themselves, kind of laughing at that, and then also realizing like, oh, wow, we're actually learning something at the same time. It's powerful. And what we do, we put folks in a hot seat is what we like to call it. We call it the show within the show. And we put them in a hot seat and put them in an environment where they can actually feel the harm so that we can now create a culture of caring people.
Right. Okay. Anything on that, Miss Monica?
No, I'm listening. I'm ready for the conversation.
Okay, well, we kind of started the conversation. So anytime you feel like you have something to jump in, just please do so.
I will.
Miss Jones, you were saying something. So at what age this hot seat and everything? So where are we starting with that? 8, 10, 12, teenage or something like that. So
So I have a lot of conversations with young people all the time. And I would say the conversation starts maybe around, I would say 13, 14 years old. And they would say to me, Miss J, well, you're talking about all of this consent and sexual assault and sexual harassment and sex. And I'm kind of uncomfortable talking about this stuff. And I tell people all the time, especially young people, if you're uncomfortable talking about sex, then you probably shouldn't be having it, right? Because we've got to talk about sex, and then we've also got to talk about consent. We've got to talk about sex, and we've got to talk about sexual harassment and sexual assault. Because what we're finding is a lot of young people are getting themselves in trouble because they're not asking. They're not getting permission. They're not getting that consent, right?
right.
And if they're not getting this, continuous, agreed upon, free from duress and harm type of conversation, then again, you probably shouldn't be having it. So for us, with the work we do, especially because we do a lot of work with the military also, we're typically talking about between the 18 to the 26 age range is where we do a lot of work. But if you're in an environment where you're starting to explore your sexuality and you're comfortable with sex and having that conversation and kissing, I think you should be talking about this stuff. I think you should definitely talk about it, because again, the biggest thing that I find is that young people find themselves a lot of times in trouble because they didn't get consent.
Okay. Arby.
Well, I wanted to key in on the importance of counseling. Like we talk a lot about prevention because me and Ms. Jones, we've been doing this, like I said, since our days of equal opportunity advising in 2003. But not so long ago, a couple of years ago, the military, the Air Force in particular, has initiated DPH, the Department of Psychological Help, to try to get people help and counseling after they reported it. So when we talk about this, and I'm glad you're on, Ms. Monica, this is something that is truly needed for the next step. It's not just enough to be aware of it and report it. We need to take that next step and say, so how do we grow from it? Or like my battle buddy, Ms. Jones says, how do we go from victim to survivor to thriver? And we do that through counseling with education. This is an ongoing thing. There's no such thing as getting the word out there, putting the poster up on April, and then stop it. No, this continues.
Absolutely. I agree with you so much, Battle. Even though this is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, we have to get away from just talking about sexual assault in April. It's not just in April, because sexual assault doesn't happen in a silo. It's not only happening in 1 month. And so we have to continue this conversation throughout the year and kind of put it in front of people where we're continuously talking about it. And if we're constantly engaged, at least in the conversation, that's going to start to target the bad behaviors, because people are going to start to feel uncomfortable with things, so to speak, going down on their watch. You know what I mean? Like if I'm having inappropriate conversation, or you see the little jokes or the innuendos, the inappropriate touching, that kind of thing. If we're talking about it outside of April, we're just talking about it where people are comfortable with being uncomfortable in that environment, right? Like I'm comfortable with saying this isn't right, so I'm going to speak out against it. I'm comfortable with saying with what you're doing is inappropriate, and I'm not going to allow that to happen in front of me. If we can get people comfortable about those conversations, again, I think that we can see some change. So we got to talk about it outside of April, and then also this helps those individuals that have been, like Orvi was saying, that have been a victim of trauma, to work towards their resiliency, to work towards their healing. Why? Because the environments are safer. Why? Because the environments are indicative of one that is healthy, right? If the environment that they're in is surrounding with such negative conversation, that conversation could be triggering to that individual, and that's that hurts them on their journey to resiliency, to healing. So just this last week, we were actually doing training on this, and we were talking about the long-term impacts of trauma and how that trauma can impact the individual long after, years after they've actually experienced the harm. Why? Because of the toxic behaviors that are happening literally right behind them. And so, we talked about not wanting someone who is a victim. And I'm only saying victim just to kind of separate the three that I'm talking about: victim, survivor, and thriving survivor. But in order for us to elevate to those different levels, a lot of it has to do with our environment. A lot of it has to do with the people that we surround ourselves with, along with the hard work that we have to do. And I say we because I am a thriving survivor. But it has a lot to do with the work that we have to do to heal. And so we can't stay in that victim mode forever. Eventually you want to be able to start working towards cultivating that inner peace. You get there. So now I need to be in the mode where I'm just that survivor, where I'm like, yes, this thing has happened to me, but I'm not going to allow it to define who I am. And then ultimately get to the point where you're thriving, where you say, you recognize that, okay, yes, I was a victim of this, but it's not going to stop me. I'm going to continue to push forward. I'm going to have a normal life. I'm going to be healthy, even though I have these scars that no one can see, and I think it's a process, I really do. I think it's a process, but I think together we can all make a huge difference.
All right. I know I had I don't know which podcast session it was, but I asked the question, should there be a statute of limitation on sexual assault? I can't remember exactly. And one of the comments came in, the viewer said no, because that person has to live with that, forever, the rest of his or her life or something like that. And I hate that comment came in later. I wish it would have came in during this time so we could have kind of addressed it. But the thing with that is it came in later. So I was glad she asked it, because someone on the panel could have answered that, or, that question at that time. So I didn't have anything. But, I just wanted to say or ask, how do we, I know you said like at age 13, but I'm sure sexual assault starts way before that.
Oh, yeah.
So, yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh,
right.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I mean, so think about it from this perspective, and I think that you can chime in here and give some more information, Monica. But just as parents, right? Just as parents, from the time that, as a parent, and speaking for self, From the time that my children were young, and I'm talking 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, and they're discovering their body, I am telling them at a very young age that your body is yours and yours alone, that no one has rights over your body. I'm the auntie, or the friend that, if grandma walks in the room and says, "Give me a kiss" to the 2-year-old, and 2-year-old is in terrible twos and says no, and mom or other auntie or other cousin says, "You better go over there and give your grandma a kiss." I'm the one that says, don't you force that child to say no. Allow them to respect their body and respect that no, and respect those boundaries, because what you don't realize is that you're confusing that child, because you're telling that child it's okay for this adult, even though I said no, it's okay for you to touch me when you don't want to. It's okay for you to kiss me when that's not what I want. So then now if someone touches that child inappropriately, I'm so confused. That poor child is so confused. Well, you just told me that it's okay for this person to touch me any way they want, even though I said no. So I think from a very young age, I mean, from the time that child can speak, you should be educating that young person on their body and the rights of their body, and that no one has rights over their body. Because you're right, there's young people, unfortunately, due to molestation and all of these other kind of things, that are being touched inappropriately.
And this, I just want to jump in on this. I'm sorry, Miss Monica. You go ahead, and I'm gonna jump in, but I want to touch on something that Miss Jones just said that's super important in my training. Go ahead, Miss.
I just wanted to say I appreciate what has been said so far, especially when Tanya was talking about the youth, and when they're under the age of 13, because sometimes when we're talking about sexual assault prevention, it's not even being transferred when we talk about it within our own families. And some of the times that when we kind of think about sexual assault and victimization, you're not thinking about that molestation that occurred with that child that was 4, 5, 3, 6, and all of that. So as Tanya did say, when a child is able to say no, we shouldn't force upon them to allow someone to hug, kiss, sit on a lap, or things of that nature. And when we're talking about victimization, one of the things that we have to remember in order to start having that conversation, and in order for people to kind of move where they're able to share, or even to move into where they're getting counseling, we have to really talk about the shame, because shame can keep your mouth absolutely shut. Because you are taking on what was happening. You're the blame. And we have done a terrible job of that as a society, of blaming the victim, blaming the woman that has been assaulted, blaming the woman that has been victimized. So that is something that we have to continue talking about in our communities, and how we stand up for the victims. It absolutely has to be done, because shame will keep our mouths closed. Shame will keep that person from going to counseling. Shame will keep that person from telling mom, dad, sister, brother, any trusted adult that this has happened to them, because they're blaming themselves, and they're looking at what's going on in society as a reason why they will not tell. We have a history of that, from our church members to our family members to our elected officials until our police officers. All those people have a hand in what we see is going on when people try to tell or report that they've been victimized.
Now, what I wanted to share on that, because this also ties in what I have to say about that. First, I wrote a book, and it was based on everything that we're talking about, how people focus on the victim instead of the predator, survivor other than the predator. And one of the passages in my book, when you first read it, it says that I go out of my way to make a hostile working environment for predators. And this is something that I think will change the narrative. Far too often, when we talk about sexual harassment, sexual assault, we focus on people that have been harmed. And sometimes people think they're doing the right thing by saying that the victim shouldn't have presented themselves a certain way. We need to throw that away. The Army tried to throw that away back in 2005, but I'm a little more forceful, and I'm saying today and every day, the first question should be, how was the predator able to do what they did? And part of it is in grooming. When we talk about the little kid that says no, that doesn't want to sit on the lap, or things that happen in the family where they say, hey, you need to keep that quiet because you're going to embarrass the family or embarrass the church. These are the workings that helps predators.
Absolutely.
When we talk about sexual assault, sexual harassment, the one thing that the predator needs is to make sure that everybody feels so uncomfortable that they'll rather point at the victim than the perpetrator. When they don't say anything, this works for the predator. So we need to encourage them. And the reason I say we need to encourage them is not just the survivors. When predators are out there grooming, they're not just grooming the little kids, the little boys or the girl, or the women and men who also sexually assaulted. They're not just grooming them, they're grooming the whole community. And when they groom the whole community gets it mixed up. And I'm going to use the example with the kids being forced to kiss relatives. There are a lot of relatives that would never harm a child. And I got to put this out there. A lot of relatives would never harm a child. They're kissing because that's how they were brought up. They're kissing because they want to show you love. They're kissing because it's a family dynamic. But the problem is the predator counts on you to do that so they can blend in.
Mm-hmm.
Predators don't wear shirts or tags to say, hey, I'm a predator. What they do is try to fit in what's norm to get away with what they're doing. Where auntie might come in and give a little kiss and say, sit on my lap. A predator say, I could do this wide open and nobody's going to question it because everybody else said this is okay. So we got to be able to be in a position to say, if somebody says no, it's not because we're calling you a predator. We're training them to be able to set boundaries for themselves. And you can't just wait till they're teenagers. You can't just wait till they're going through puberty. This should start as soon as they understand what yes and no means.
Right. And, just to touch base, to go back to what Miss LaMonica was saying about sitting on the lap. My oldest son was in daycare one time, and I just happened to go in there, and it was I don't know who the guy was, and my son was sitting on that guy's lap, and I put a stop to that right then. And I also let the manager of the daycare know that, I don't know who that guy is. And I think later on she was saying it was a cousin or family member or something, but I says he has no right letting my son sit on his lap. So I put an end to that, for just popping up in there in that daycare. And then just on another note, I covered also on one of my podcasts how you always hear you can be walking along with your child or baby or whatever, and someone will say, oh, he or she is so pretty, and she is so this or that. And then the parent is usually saying, well, tell them hi or say hi to that perfectly stranger. Have no idea who that person is. And now you telling them, and there we go, putting trust into that stranger. And I think that we should stop doing that, because I don't know who that person is. And you telling your kid, oh, it's okay to go on and say hi, when we should be telling them no.
Absolutely.
Don't talk to that person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And and for those families that know, I just want to chime in, for those families that know that predators exist in their families, because they typically know, right? They need to call these folks out, right? They need to call these folks out. I mean, it is what it is. And, there's a lot of harm being done to young people, and families are kind of sitting by idly for whatever the case may be. And some of this stuff is going down on their watch, and they're turning the blind eye,
Right.
Thinking because, it was a long time ago, or it only happened to one person, or we're going to do our job to, keep this person away from everyone, so to speak. But they still keep getting invited to the family reunions and to all of the events and all of this. And then, when people don't want to show up, it's like, well, why? I remember one time I had a conversation with my mom, and I was talking to her, and she was like, well, Tanya, we got to forgive people. We got to forgive people. And I'm like, to what degree? I said, even if I say, okay, yes, you can forgive. And, some people say that, well, you've got to, pray for people and all of this kind of thing. I'm like, yeah, you can, but that doesn't mean that you're now still entitled to access, right? Because boundaries are real. And just because people are related by blood doesn't mean that you have the right to still cause me harm at no degree, even if it's your presence, right? So I used to say, it doesn't matter if they're family. It doesn't matter. We need to hold people accountable. And if this is the thing that they did, then they need to be held accountable. So my thing now is, you sure you want to invite me to that family reunion?
Right.
I'm gonna start putting it all out there. So you might not want me to show up at that family reunion, because it's time out for for all of this harm that are taking place and that are completely paralyzing some individuals, where unfortunately they can't move forward. Again, we want to be able to get people that are victims of harm from victim to survivor to thriver. But what that looks like for everybody is not quite the same. And unfortunately, we know that some people never get to the stage where they are thriver because they've taken their own life, right? So we've got to do a better job as a community, that when we see these type of behaviors happening, especially when they're happening in our family, that we call them out, because 9 times out of 10, it's more than just one person.
And I want to say something on that, Tanya. I think that I am a licensed minister, and I know that a lot of families for years have talked about the forgiveness and all that. And forgiveness is good. Forgiveness is for you. And forgiveness does not necessarily mean that you have to come into interaction with them. And we have to start thinking. And I think now our families and people and individuals are seeing that some of the things that we have done culturally as a people and what we've done as a community are some things that are no longer viable. And so now people are stepping up and saying just those things, that no means no. It is, don't force a child to do anything like that. And they're also changing how we are allowing people into our space, especially when we know that they touched somebody. And I don't care if it was 15, 20 years ago, that person is no longer invited, because you have to think about how many times somebody is re-victimized by having to live through that trauma again, that they're right there in the room, they're in the vicinity, they're in the space of that person that raped, molested, assaulted, harmed them, fondled, whatever the case may be. They're being re-victimized when they have to see that person all the time. And I think it is changing in our families, but we definitely have to do a better job. And with what now, counseling is not as taboo as it was. It's no longer a white person's thing, because now we are seeing a lot more people of color, a lot more Black people coming in and having and talking very candidly that they are going through counseling for whatever reason. So I think that just how we're growing out of certain things has been definitely good.
Right. All righty. Well, I will tell you about this. For me, I am not that forgiving person like that. Sometimes I think we use that word, I'll forgive them. I'm just not that forgiving like that. So, but again, that's just me. One thing before we get to going, Ms. Jones, I noticed the time, and I know you're in a different time zone, so you probably don't have about 30 minutes left or something.
I'm still good so far. I'm okay for right now.
Okay. I just want to make sure I be mindful of the time that you have with us. And
thank you.
So when Arby come to me with this topic, so I just did a little research, but I only know what Google tells me. So I just like to ask you guys as the professionals like that. And so I asked Google the question about men, and it told me that 1 out of every 10 men are rape victims. And I was kind of surprised by that, but I don't maybe know why. But so it's not just women or whatever. I know it's not just because I guess I should have known, because I know boys have been molested and everything like that, and assaulted also. And I didn't go into depth with the age of the men. But just if y'all just want to talk a little bit about the men part of it, because that caught me off guard.
Yeah.
Well, as a man, I would like to go first on this one, and that'll usually let me go out there and jump on it, because it's part of the reason why I've gotten to this business in the first place. When we talk about those reports of the 1 out of 7 or 1 out of 8 men, or 1 1 out of 5 women and girls that have been sexually assaulted. We got to keep in mind, these are numbers of people that report it.
Right.
Those numbers are way higher
Yeah.
because this is one of the most underreported crimes that's out there. And when it comes to boys and men, the biggest problem is what's the expectation of men and boys? To be tough, to not let anybody violate you. And if you did, somehow you must have wanted it that way. This is what predators thrive on. And I want to tie this back into what we were talking about with forgiveness, because a lot of times when this happens, the predator is going to try to slide back over there and try to get forgiveness so they can stay undercover to do this to somebody else. But what I would like people to do, whether it's in the church, whether it's at the family reunion or at work, is to go and to be the advocate. You see, predators and people with predatory behaviors are cowards. They only do what the community allows them to do. If they go to a family reunion and Uncle Arvie there staring at you hard as hell because you're looking at his little niece and nephew, they're not going to try it. If you at work whistling and kissing at somebody and Mr. Baker, the advocate, come around that corner and pop a seat between you and the person you're harassing, they're not going to do it. Now, I'm not saying everybody's got to be straightforward like me. There's different ways to handle it, to get involved, either telling somebody or making something happen. But Wizzo, you've known me since Iraq back in 2008, 2009. I'm a very direct person.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to let things slide. I won't come up and say, hey, you're a rapist or you being rapey, but I will get in your airspace and make you uncomfortable about what you're doing. Why are you hugging her so close? She never asked you for a massage.
Right.
Why are you trying to pull them behind the Connex? These are the things that we got to teach our people who get upset when they say, why you won't let me kiss my niece or nephew and stuff? Well, because we're trying to teach respect. Stop putting it about you as an individual and put it as you trying to take care of somebody. And if you understand that you're educated, it should be easy. But if you're a predator, it's going to be damn hard because everybody's eyes are on you.
Right. I got you on that. Miss Monica, I'd just like to ask you, as a counselor at school, and I don't even know if you can answer this. I don't know. So I'm gonna just ask, do you see any signs or symptoms from a young kid coming in, boy, girl, or whatever, that may have experienced anything and you've had to deal with it or address it or something? I don't know if you can answer anything like that.
I mean, it's not a present work situation that I currently experience, but I have experienced where students have, did not feel comfortable around, a certain teacher, the way that person looked at me, whether it's a teacher, whether it's another student in the class, and whether it was a janitor, whoever it was, sometimes students will come and say, that person makes me uncomfortable. Can I get a schedule change? Or even in certain, extracurricular groups outside of school and things like that. I've had experiences where people have talked about being uncomfortable around a certain individual. And, my train of thought is to always believe. It's not mine to investigate, but I'm going to believe that person and make the necessary steps that I have to make as a counselor, whether it is making a report, talking to the student in depth and, talking to a parent. But there have been occasions, and we have to really understand that grooming is a trait that some people have that are generally around younger people. In high school, there was a teacher that, you're more mature than the rest of your classmates. I mean, if I was to let something like that go, who knows how it would have transpired. But to me, that then, made me uncomfortable. And so we have to talk about some of those grooming behaviors, how it's very easy in certain situations for that person to get close to a student? How are they building that trust with a student to come in and have them bring their guards down where that victimization can occur? Because they're doing and saying some things to bring the guard down and take that wall down, and they're looking to see some things about that person. Are you isolating yourself? What is your friend group like? Do they know your family history? Are you saying that you can't talk to mom and dad? All of those different things are they use to their benefit so that they can further victimize you and do what they want to, whether it's sexual or not. It's still something that the conversation definitely has to be had.
Gotcha.
And can I chime in here? And LaMonica, you could probably talk about this a little bit more. In the instance in the references that she shared with us, those are for those individuals that actually speak up, right? Those are for the young people that have enough courage to come forward, right? Adults and children are completely different, where it may be a little bit easier for an adult to come forward, to share with a friend, to talk to someone and tell them, hey, this is going on with me, to potentially, even if they just seek out help to ensure that they're physically okay, right? That their body is okay, right? Young people, they respond and they communicate completely different. Young people, their way of communication, their communication style, their language is going to be completely different. So they may not tell a counselor, they may not tell a friend or a peer or a teacher. What they may do is they may change their behavior, right? So you have this A student, you have someone that cares about life, that's athletic, that has a whole lot of friends, and then all of a sudden this child becomes very withdrawn. Like LaMonica said, maybe even isolate themselves. Now they're getting into fights. Maybe they're using profanity. Maybe they're now using alcohol or drugs. They're playing hooky from school, And then when you see this child, you start to notice immediately the shift in their behavior, right? You notice something is going on, but you just assume maybe the kid is hanging out with the wrong crowd, and maybe they're bad or they're getting in trouble, they're misbehaving. You want to punish that child, yell at that child, instead of just taking the time out to say, are you okay? Are you all right? I noticed that there's some things going on with you. There's a change in your behavior. I noticed that your grades are going down. What's going on? Maybe if we can try to take a little bit of time instead of just writing folks off, writing some of these young people off. Maybe even some of the ones that are finding themselves that are always in problems in school. You see them in school and every single day is a problem. Every single day is a problem. I was talking to a young woman yesterday, and she was sharing with me, a doctor as a matter of fact, and she was sharing with me when she was talking to some of the young people in some of the schools in the inner city. And child came to the school, and as soon as they got into school, they got into a fight. And she was like, oh my goodness, this is like the third time this week you've gotten to a fight. This is a bad kid. What's going on with you? Why you keep getting into fights? It's not even 8 o'clock in the morning. And he was like, if you know what I experienced before I even got to school at 8 o'clock, you wouldn't be asking me this. I wake up in the morning to a mom and a dad that are fighting with each other. Mom, dad wailing on each other. Then because mom, dad is upset and they're fighting each other, they come in the room to wake us up, and they're yelling and screaming and beating on us to get out the door. Then I get out the door, and on my way from the time I leave to the door till I get to the school, I'm being met with bullies. Someone, stole my lunch money, maybe stole my sneakers and whatever, like on the way to school. And then by the time I get to school, one more person picks on me. I just get all of this built up from 6:30 in the morning to 8:30 in the morning. So by the time 8:30 in the morning gets here, I'm so stressed out. The first person that comes at me, I'm letting it go on that person, right? So if we don't take the time to peel that onion to find out what's going on with that child before they even come into the school, that in itself can be problematic, and then that's a lot of work too, right? Because there's only so many hours in the day. Teachers only make enough so much money. They only have so much time. They have so many students. How do I determine who's being touched at home and who's not? And all I'm trying to do is just teach the lesson. So it's a community effort. It's everybody's job, unfortunately, to kind of to tap in and check on these young people and just, ask if they're okay, and just kind of speaking for self. One of the biggest frustrating things for me as an adult is to sit at a round table amongst the elders in my family that will sit down and to this day, make jokes and laugh and have conversations about my behavior as a young person. That every time they looked around, I went from being this, happy-go-lucky kind of child to all of a sudden, every time you look around, I was always fighting. And and what that tells me as an adult is that you all noticed there was a change in my behavior. You all noticed that there was something going on with me, but you were so focused and so hyper laser focused on the bad behavior that no one took the time to ask where was it stemming from. No one took the time to ask. And so what it tells me again as an adult was that you all noticed it. You all saw it, right? So at what point do we ask the question, are you okay?
Yeah.
You okay? Sometimes it's just that simple, and it's sad that we have to go around asking these questions, but I'm reminded of it every single year when I have a group of interns that come and work with me. Every single year, there's at least one that says, Ms. J, can I talk to you for a moment? Can I talk to you for a moment? And they feel comfortable enough because we've created a safe enough space for them to feel like, okay, I can trust this person and I can talk to them, right? But there's always at least one. That's one too many.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, and I'm glad Tanya said that, because they notice the behavior, right? And so what we're seeing in society is sometimes I'll say it like this. Sometimes I hate reading and seeing stories, and you're looking at, news online and you're reading the comments. At some point, I've learned to stop reading the comments, because then I become so angry at humanity, because we kind of show that we don't have any empathy for people that have been victimized. But it's always, what was she wearing? What were they doing? If they wasn't dressed like this wouldn't happen. Yeah. If they wasn't acting like that, maybe this wouldn't have happened to them. Why were they over there? They were drinking. They were, smoking drugs, or whatever the case may be. You're saying it's still that person that has been assaulted. It's the victim's fault. Why are we victimizing the victim all over again? And that is something that we really need to start talking about. Why is it that we're not believed? Why are we putting everything? I don't care if a person is walking down the street scantily dressed. That still does not give anybody a reason to violate them. Right. And when we start having those conversations, we need to start talking about some self-control. That's not part of the conversation all the time. Where's the self-control? How are we raising other people?
Yeah. And unfortunately, we're miseducating our young people, right? And at this point, it's not just girls, it's boys too. But we're educating our young people on how not to rape, or how not to get raped, or how not to be a victim, right? Instead of teaching those individuals that have the potential to be the perpetrator how not to rape, right? I heard a young lady say one time, and actually we this is one of the lines in our script. When one of the mothers says, "Well, when my daughter gets older, I'm going to teach her not to dress this way, not to do this thing, instead of saying, well, I'm going to educate my son not to do this thing, So, and then we turned the question around and said, well, then what if it was your son? What are you going to teach him? So if you're going to teach your daughter not to wear this thing, then what are you going to teach your son? Right? So we've moved into a society where we want to teach or educate the victim not to become victims, not to be victimized, when that's just ridiculous, right? Because ultimately the only person that's responsible, the only person that can dictate that is the perpetrator, because the perpetrator is the one that's causing the harm. So those are the individuals that we try to target, and especially with us in interactive advocacy. You know, when we do our presentations and our shows, they say, well, Ms. J, why do you showcase the perpetrator like that? I said, because the perpetrator's in your audience. The perpetrators in they're amongst us. So we got to show the perpetrator, right? I said, but I'm speaking to those individuals that are just riding the fence, right? Those individuals that are exhibiting bad behavior, that haven't crossed the line yet, and that don't even recognize that what they're doing is causing somebody harm. And if I can touch those people, if I can get those people, those individuals to really take a hard look at their behavior and be like, oh shoot, that's me. Like I could be that person. Like I could be the person literally, if I don't make that hard right decision now, that's literally walking off the stage in handcuffs. Oh dang, I didn't even know that was me, right? Or the battle buddy or the friend that said, wait a minute, that's you. Like that is definitely, like, I know that person. And gender doesn't matter, whether it's a female or male. But if we can touch those individuals and get them to see those bad behaviors as bad behaviors, then the goal, the hope is that we're now starting to see less and less perpetrators, right? That's the goal. That's the hope.
Okay, just to put out to our viewers, I see we have a few more watching. Just to let them know, our topic for today is sexual assault and awareness prevention. I want to just go back for 1 second. Arvie was talking about a lot of the predators and everything like that, and I think I watched the news sometime too much, because there was a doctor that assaulted a young girl here in Temple. There was a police officer in Killeen, Texas, rape. The list goes on and on. But I've had a podcast on this, something similar to the fact of people we put too much trust in, because y'all know what, I just had that point and it left my head just then. But I'm sorry. But
hey, we with you with it, and it is part of the trust that we put in officials, blind trust. But I want to go back to what we were talking about with the education. Mm-hmm. Like Ms. Jones said, education is the key, so we can make aware people that's on the fence doing predatory behaviors, not even knowing that's wrong because it's been the accepted norm in their community. But I also want to reach back to something Miss LaMonica said that is super important. People don't put themselves in this situation. And a lot of times the community at large is molded and trained and groomed to say, why did you do this? Why were you wearing this? Why were you over there? Newsflash, predators don't care what you wear. You can have on a spacesuit. If it's a predator, they trying to take that spacesuit off you. The question that we have to ask, instead of how did you get yourself in that situation, is how did this person that's a predator or predator-like behavior, groom them to let their guards down to be there? Nobody, and I've been a victim advocate for years. Every survivor I talked to never willingly went to a location or area to be assaulted. This predator groomed that individual and the people around them to get them away to do what they do. When we talk about this education, we really got to focus on the fact that predators are always going to try to find a way around it. The key is teaching enough people to understand predatory behavior so they're not confused when it happens. You know, I'm pretty sure you've heard of situations where somebody was being assaulted or they reported a rape and people are confused, like, well, was this person wrong? Because the person they're accusing can get women, or the person they're accusing is such a great stand-up person in the community, and that shouldn't be the question.
Right.
The question, number one, and you said this earlier, Ms. LaMonica, were you a victim advocate before? Because you're saying the things that I used to teach all the time. Your job is not to CSI anything. Your job is to believe the person and do your job. And that's all we need to do. If we do that, that would cause enough confusion for predators out there to say, hey, this is not a safe community for me to do what I want to do, because people are watching. And number one, they're going to believe this person, not just because they're a kid, because it doesn't just happen to kids.
Right.
It happens to men. It happens to lady workers. It happens to all kind of people. But if we really want to make a stand, the first thing we have to do as a community is believe when somebody comes forward that something happened. And then the second thing is make sure we're being aware of predatory types that are doing these things, because that's how they get away. They blend in. They never want to stand out.
And just to piggyback off of that, the reality is that most individuals that have been sexually assaulted, they know the perpetrator. They know them. They have a relationship with them. Maybe it's someone that they like, they admire. Maybe they've gone out on a date a couple of times, right? Maybe they've even been intimate with that person, So most of the times it's not like, you think of a predator or a perpetrator, it's not like this fictitious person that's lurking around the corner. Not to say that doesn't happen, because there are those scenarios as well. But most of the time, it's someone that you know, someone that you feel comfortable enough and trust to be in close proximity. And again, like Orvi and LaMonica were talking about earlier, that grooming. They're literally trying to see just how far they can push the envelope and see what they can get away with. So, we don't want to lose sight on the fact that when we're trying to keep people safe, that sometimes it's really hard because you're in an environment that you think is safe. I was sexually assaulted in my home because I invited this person in. So, just a few things for us to keep in mind when we're thinking about perpetrators.
Right. Orvi, I'm not a victim advocate, but I am an advocate for the students that I serve. So I will say that, but I am a mandated reporter by the state of Texas as an educator and as a licensed professional counselor. So, that's my part with it. And to what Tanya just said about those safe, you're in a place where you think is safe. And so you've invited that person in, or we've seen it for years. It's happened with school cases. We see the female teachers and the young boys, and we've seen, vice versa. We've seen the adult males with the young females and the grooming behavior and the trust, because you're at a school, you're in a school setting and you think that is a safe space. You're in the church and you think that is a safe space. You're in your home and that is supposed to be your safe space. And all these things are transpiring. I'm at grandmama's house and that's a safe space, but here's, Uncle Pooh, whatever the case may be, absolutely wholeheartedly agree with what has been said. And we definitely have to start having that continuing, not start having because it's already going, but continuing that conversation.
Yeah. And one of the conversations that I think that we're not having enough of, and we are starting to see it, it's the large number of young men that are coming on social media that are saying, I also had sex with my teacher, but I wasn't raped or I wasn't sexually assaulted. You have a 14, a 15, a 16, a 17-year-old that is entering into sexual relations with this teacher who ultimately is in a position of power over them, right? In power, influence. And you're a boy and you're thinking to with all your other friends, I'm cool, right? Like, I'm the one who smashed with the t-shirt and she's over here, she's checking me out and I wasn't sexually assaulted. I wonder if your parent would feel the same way. I wonder if your parent would be like, no, you were not sexually assaulted at such a young age. That how can you at 13 or 14-year-old have sex with an adult when you're not even old enough to give consent? Right? Especially in some states. So, I think that so many of these young boys, because of the machismo that's associated with being able to have sex with someone that's so much older, they don't even recognize that someone is doing them harm and that they're being taken advantage of. And I'm really, it's one of those conversations that I've been thinking about lately that I'm like, I really want to start talking to some of these young people, because many of them, and I just literally saw another IG post about this just the other day, and the gentleman was like, yeah, I smashed my teacher, but I wasn't sexually assaulted. Like, I consented. At 14 or 15, how?
Oh, Battle. Let me jump in there on that, because there are some boys, and I'm speaking as a boy, where their little goal in life is to be that person they talk about. They really look at this. But also from my advocacy, I found that there are little girls that their goal in life is to get that teacher with the pretty hair or the one with the nice car. But what we need to teach, not just the kids, because we need to have a conversation with the kids.
Absolutely.
What we need to teach and have a conversation with these adults is that statutory rape is real. I don't care what your intent is. The impact is you broke the damn law.
Right.
So let's focus on that. We can talk about it all day. These boys get on. Yeah, go ahead and report it, because you are not in the power dynamic to be in control, even though you so-called smash your teacher. Your teacher was. Your teacher was the one that drove you somewhere or took you somewhere. Your teacher was in a position of power, and your teacher is the one that's going to jail because statutory rape is real.
Right.
I'd like to ask Miss LaMonica, because I've been out of the school for a couple of years.
Just a few.
But just to ask, they used to have like seminars or something like that back in the day. So I'm just wondering, are they teaching any of this now in small groups, large groups, going over with the teachers or anything like that in school? I mean, I'm just asking. I don't know.
Every year we have to have compliance training, which talks about all of this that we're talking about. It's talking about the sexual harassment. It's talking about, separating yourselves. What is, healthy relationships with students? What, how do you communicate with students? Private numbers, emails, all that, not being done, not being provided, using certain apps to communicate with students that, is more group related, not individually.
Right.
So we do have that type of training, but to come in and say that we're having big, small groups, it's a money thing. So if your district and your campus cannot afford to pay for this particular speaker, then no, those things are not occurring, but teachers are trained every year. Depending on classes that students take or depending upon what your campus or your district is pushing, that year. That will depend on who's coming to speak to you about what topic. And, a lot of times in these school districts, parents are opting out of conversations whenever it is about, sex or drugs or anything like that. Parents are opting out and saying, sometimes it is I don't want you teaching my child this, or I don't want you indoctrinating my child on anything, that I wouldn't talk about. So sometimes as educators, our hands are tied about what we are bringing into the schools.
Right. Okay. Definitely understand that. Anybody else got anything on there?
I just want to say, Miss LaMonica, that this is a great opportunity to speak offline with Miss Jones. If you look at training, sorry, Battle, I got to put it out there because I believe in the product so much. This is what needs to happen, and it's not just again with the students. I think that's one of our biggest issues today is that parents saying they don't want you to teach their kids anything, but you got to make sure their kids know everything.
Right.
We can't get all the kids, but if we can have those senior leader meetings before y'all go back to school with the teachers, with the people that work as adults around the kids, that is a step forward instead of just being stagnant. And Miss Jones, again, I've worked with Miss Jones personally, and I know she has programs that either she has in place or can put together for you. And that's really where it goes to. No matter where you put this at, whether it's military or civilian, everything comes back to education and training. The more we educate, the less problem we have to deal with, because predators work in ignorance. If people are confused about what's supposed to be right, if they're not sure who to report to, that's where predators thrive. But if you have a situation where every beginning of the year you're doing this training, you're doing quarterly training, everybody knows who's going to get in trouble if this happens, predators are less likely to do it.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that teachers have such a hard time. I have several teachers in my family, in my immediate family with my siblings. And so I know that they have a hard time because the challenges are you're trying to do your job to educate them, and then you're competing with all of the different personalities and all of the emotions that young people are going through. And then, of course, like you said, the parents. And you have some parents that are very hands-on, some that are very hands-off. And for those parents who are saying that, I don't want my child to learn this thing, you really have to ensure that you're doing your due diligence, because many of your children are learning this stuff anyway. And if they're going to learn it, you should be more inclined that they learn it from you the right way, or learn it from professionals,
Right.
versus learn it from those individuals that are grooming those children that are in isolation, that are grooming those children that they sense have different vulnerabilities. And let me just go into it. I know we're talking about sexual assault, but let me just go into another area real quick, because we're talking about grooming. Then you also have the whole human trafficking era. This is a huge thing as well. And what sometimes parents don't realize is that other children are grooming your children.
Right.
Yeah.
You think that, oh, it's not that big of a deal. This is just my daughter or son's friend, but this daughter or son could potentially be in a human trafficking situation in your school, and they are now grooming your child. And so you think that you're not even having this conversation, and next thing you know, your child is being led out of that institution and now entering into a human trafficking situation, and they don't even realize that it's happening, right? Because they think that this is the older boyfriend or girlfriend. So you have all of these different dynamics that are playing out in our schools. I don't remember if it was just Florida. Was it Florida just the other day where all of these teachers got picked up for human trafficking inside the school? It was like a huge big thing just a couple of weeks ago. I think it may have been in Florida. But it was huge. It was so many people that were involved in this. So your child is competing with all of this other stuff, and parents, you've got to do more to stay involved with what's going on, or caregiver. Let me say that, because not everyone, unfortunately, has parents, but the caregiver, you have to do a little bit more to ensure that these young people are okay with this dialogue. And that's really what it's about. It's about if you as the parent can create an environment in which it's safe, where that child feels comfortable enough to come and talk to you, then that's where it begins. My house was always the house that all the kids came to. I had so many children, young people sit on the couch, so to speak, and say, "Hey, Ms. J, can I talk to you for a little bit?" And I'm like, well, wait a minute, did I turn into the counselor for everyone, so to speak? And so my house always had plenty of love, plenty of food, but just the freedom to know that you're in a safe space. And so they would all come to me. All of my sons, and I have 3 sons, all of their friends, whether it was a male or female, would come and talk to me. And there were quite a few times when I had to say, okay, listen, we're going to have to talk to mom and dad, and are you okay if I talk to mom and dad or caregiver and say, share with them some of the stuff that was going on, and at least pull some of these people together. But parents have to be, or caregivers have to be able to do that. They have to be able to create that space where they have open dialogue. And I've even created a tool to help you do that.
Absolutely.
All right. If I could may ask them.
Can I say one thing on what she just said?
Uh-huh.
Okay. I don't think it's a separate conversation, Tanya, when we talk about the human trafficking. because it's still sexual assault. And so
Yes.
sometimes when we're talking about human trafficking, people are thinking that these people are being taken away from home, and that's not always the case. Some of these young people are being trafficked, and they're still going home each and every night to their parent. Some of them, you can drop them off at school through that front door, and out that back door, they're leaving and they're going and they're being used and victimized. They may not see it as victimization, but they're being victimized just the same. So it's not a separate conversation. That is still something that definitely needs to be talked on. Hey, Wizzo, you might have to have a part 2.
Right. Most definitely. We looking forward to it. You got anytime you want to use this platform, you most definitely reach out to me. I already know that we can make it happen. But what I was going to ask or say here, so we talked about how the teachers, classrooms are full, they're not recognized, they're not seeing whatever. And so now you have this parent, or caregiver, like Ms. Jones was saying, that's the single one or not having time to notice that or notice what this child is going through, how do we reach that kid right there? How do we reach that 10 or 12-year-old kid that the teacher is missing the signs, the caregiver is working 2 jobs trying to make ends meet, and that kid is just out there? How do we reach that kid? We've already talked about how one come forward, but just because that one came forward, there's probably several more that didn't. But how do we reach that kid?
That's the challenge.
I want to jump out there again, Battle. And this is something that we've done in the military, and we're still working for it, but it's something that could be implemented in the civilian world, and that's creating that community of trust. If you think back as being a kid, I don't want to speak for everybody else, but speak for self. I can keep a lot of stuff from parenting. 54 years old today, and my mama still don't know how I got the scar on my knee because I can keep it away from her. These kids will share if they feel comfortable with sharing. So our job shouldn't be to try to get this kid to tell us something right away, because the more pressure you put on them, the more they're going to fall back. But if we create a communication hub where the kids see, hey, if I bring this forward, they're not going to blame me for wearing something or thinking it some way. They're going to listen to me and believe me. Trust me, that word's going to get around. And the more that happens, the more the kids are going to feel comfortable to come in to tell a person or a group of people that have a reputation of believing them the first time. And I got to stress that so much, because one of the things that I used to get pushback on so much training military for victim advocacy is, hey, what if I don't believe them? Okay, if you don't believe them, this is not the job for you.
Right.
This is not a job where you're supposed to find out who's telling the lie or not. This is a job of human compassion. And when somebody comes forward to tell you something, I want to make sure everybody hears this. There are some people that lie, but most people don't. It's hard as hell to get up the courage to tell you something like this in the first place.
Right.
So if they tell you, here's 2 things I want you to think about. Number one, this person is feeling very vulnerable right now to share this information with you. And number 2, and this is the big one, you must be a great person for them to come forward and share it to you in the first damn place.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Outstanding. Talking about sexual assault awareness and prevention. Guys, you guys have knocked out what little bit of questions I had. And like I said, I didn't really have much to go on. So I just kind of wanted to hear you guys. And I've been taking in and soaking in a lot. And thanks, Ari, for answering that question that my daughter asked off in there also about that gymnast doctor. So that was my daughter that asked that question. She's watching right now. So
thank you for sharing that.
Yes. So guys, so if you guys have anything else to share, we can go around. I personally don't have anything else, but you guys have been outstanding so far with information, and hoping we reach quite a few and get them to build the courage up to come in and just talk to someone, find someone to trust. So.
Well, one of the things that I would like to share, especially because you finished off with trust, a lot of it, all of the training that we do has to do with trust, right? Creating that safe space and that happy place for those young people, for individuals as a whole, as a collective, not just young people, but just people, creating a culture of caring people. All of those things are important. But when it goes back to trust, sometimes it's hard for us to establish that, and so when we try to have these conversations and these dialogues, it's uneasy. So one of the things that I did at Interactive Advocacy is that I actually created training tools. It's a part of our This Is Not a Game series. And basically what they are very immersive, interactive, the game that's not a game, that not just individuals can use in a work environment, but parents can also use with their young people. We have a training tool called Black Box, just as an example, that one of the things that I did with it is that I gave it to my son so that he could take it in with him back to college when he went back to school. And I said, hey, son, try it out and tell me, what you think, and ask some of the questions in the box. So that way it doesn't necessarily seem like the question is coming from you, but it's coming from the tool itself. And he was like, Mom, I cannot believe the answers that some of my friends gave. And I was like, how do I know you? Like, how are we friends? Like, you cannot think that. And but it was so great. And he was just like, oh man, this thing was absolutely great. He had his own podcast. They use it on the podcast. I have several other people that use it in their family settings, just to get them talking about some of these very, very uncomfortable topics. And they're filled with everything from real world scenarios, nothing cookie cutter, but real issues that young people can be facing. And what the hope is that when parents are listening or caregivers are listening to their answers, not for them to be upset, but for them to really have a better understanding and a bigger picture of what these young people are thinking. And then that way it's like, well, dang, I didn't know that they thought that. I didn't know that they thought that, for example, if I take a girl out on a date, does that mean I'm automatically entitled to, because I paid for her meal, I paid for her the movies, I paid, that I'm automatically entitled to sex? There's so many young people, both male and female, that said yes. Like, they think that they're automatic. No, they're not entitled, But at least by having this conversation, it takes more pressure off of the caregiver and puts it back into the tool, and it creates that open dialogue. So we have a series of training tools like this, Hot Topic, Tingo. I would hope that, if anyone is watching, that you would go and check it out and see if you can use them and incorporate them, like I said, in your homes, in your fraternities, or even in your working environments.
All right, outstanding.
All right.
That's my
Yeah, I just wanted to say I can be found at M2H Counseling Services.net. That is my website as well. I said at the beginning that I am on different platforms like Psychology Today, and I misspoke and said the wrong platform at the beginning, but it's Therapy for Black Girls. I do provide counseling services for people that are located in the state of Texas, and I do virtual counseling, and I do provide a safe space for people that have been victimized, that have PTSD, that have history of trauma. So if you know anyone that is in need of counseling and wanted to be virtual or in person, there's some ways to kind of reach me via that platform, those platforms.
all right. Ari?
Only thing I want to leave y'all with is don't be afraid to be an advocate. As far as me, I'm a Combat Sapper EO, but you can get with my battle to reach me, Interactive Advocacy. Do a lot of work with her, a lot of great work, military and civilian wise. But I want to leave this nugget out there for the people that's paying attention to this. It's not hard to advocate, but you can't just say I'm an advocate and be an advocate. You need to get out there and get that education. When you see these lessons, when you see groups like Interactive Advocacy providing this training, get that training, put that in your toolbox, because you never know when that family member or that dear friend comes to you and shares some information that they would rather not share with anybody. And I want you to be able to take that and get them to the type of care and help that they deserve. So don't be afraid to be an advocate, not just in April, 24/7, 365.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Hey, Wizzo, can I have one little caveat real quick? I don't know whether or not you're going to put our social media handles and everything like that in the chat somewhere where people can see it, but I just want to make sure that I give everyone my website. It's www.interactiveadvocacy.com. You can find us on all social media platforms at interactiveadvocacy.com, or just me, Tanya Jones. And then you can check out our some of the videos that we have. Please feel free to use them in your learning and training environment that we have on YouTube. They're great tools for you to download, everything from male victimization to consent. Please let them be a part of your training for some real world scenarios. And again, thank you so much for having me on your show tonight, Wizzo. I appreciate you, and I appreciate being on here with my fellow panelists this afternoon.
Most definitely. And just to anything, if you guys send me anything that you want me to tag you in, message it to me or text it or whatever, something like that, so I can make sure I get it correctly. It's easy for me to copy and paste it over there than me to try to pick it in with these two fingers like that. I'll be more than glad to share anything, even if you typed it in the chat right here, like I'll pop it up on the screen or something like that. So I'll be glad to share anything to try to get that message out there. And, I appreciate each and every one of you coming on. I appreciate you guys sharing it also, to get the word out. I've learned a lot myself from just sitting here listening to everyone. So I'm going to upload this on Spotify, as I've said, and I'm going to put it on. It's already going to be on YouTube, but I'll tag and share it on Facebook, and I'll add the tags to it that you guys send me so everyone can know how to find you, maybe reach out to anyone who needs some help out there. And so there's, just like that. So what I do is I copy that and put that on. And other than that, guys, I appreciate y'all to the fullest. And wait a minute, somebody was hitting up in the private chat. Oh, okay. I'm about to say that I had something over there, but okay, I'll get those out of there. Other than that, I appreciate y'all and thank everyone for watching Wizzo Talk. And that'll be it. And until the next time, thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.